ఎంతమంది రావాలి 122. Hope most of you have followed my previous class, gynecological diagnosis, in which we have discussed most of the menstrual problems and menstrual symptoms and the definitions of different menstrual disorders in my previous class. Today we'll be going through the menstrual disorders. So, menstrual disorders, most common gynecological complaints which we encounter in our OPDs. 25 to 35% of women will be suffering with menstrual disorders in their lifetime. So, as I told, menstrual disorders are the most frequent gynecological complaints which we encounter daily in our outpatient departments. So with various types of menstrual complaints, and most of the population are the adolescents and the young adult women. Even though these menstrual disorders are common in the extremes, like the young pubertal girls and premenopausal women too. So today we'll be learning in this class the definitions and types of abnormal uterine bleeding. How do you approach a case of abnormal uterine bleeding? Amenorrhea types and causes. Mostly amenorrhea I will be covering up in the next class, but in this class we will be going through abnormal uterine bleeding in detail, dysmenorrhea, and hopefully I will complete even premenstrual syndrome and management in this class. So first we have to know what is menstruation, right? So what is menstruation? And for menstruation to happen, you should have an intact hypothalamic, pituitary, ovarian, and uterine axis. So if this is intact and the communication is correct, then the menstruation occurs. So any break in this axis will create menstrual problems. So in my previous class, I told you about what is normal menstruation and how many at how regular it will happen and for how many days the bleeding occurs. So menstruation is the end point in a series of events which begin in our brain, that is the cerebral cortex and hypothalamus, and ends at the uterus. So all this axis has to be intact. Any break in this axis creates menstrual problems. So this is the HPO axis. So look at the hormones, gonadotropin releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus, the LH and the FSH by the anterior pituitary, and other glands also influence our the menstruation, including the thyroid and the adrenal gland. So this is how the progesterone and estrogens affect the endometrium by negative feedback and positive feedback methods. So this all you must have if the class is over, the menstruation, the normal menstruation, you would have already gone through this. So an intact HPO axis is needed. for normal menstruation. So any break in this axis or any abnormality in this axis causes menstrual problems. So let's go through the various types of menstrual cycle irregularities. In my previous class also we have gone through. Let's quickly go through this. The definitions: amenorrhea, which indicates there is absolutely there is no menstruation. It is a symptom. Actually, it is a symptom and not a disease. Oligomenorrhea, very infrequent and irregularly timed episodes at intervals of more than 35 days. What is polymenorrhea? Denotes frequent episodes of menstruation, usually less than 21 days the intervals will be. So what is menorrhagia? So you have to remember the menorrhagia is regular, timely episodes of bleeding, but the duration and the amount of bleeding is more. So the amount is mostly more than 100 ml. So 80 ml is normal. If it is more than 80 ml or more than 100 ml, it is abnormal. And the duration is flow is normal is 5 days. If it is more than 5 days, we call it as menorrhagia. What is metrorrhagia? Refers to irregular timely episodes of bleeding superimposed on normal cyclic bleeding. Hypomenorrhea. Hypomenorrhea refers to irregularly timed but scanty episodes of bleeding. Intermenstrual bleeding refers to bleeding, usually not very excessive, but occurs between otherwise normal menstrual cycles. Precocious menstruation. What is precocious menstruation? Normal menstrual ages. In my last class, I have told you it is 12.5 to 15.5 years of age. If it is less than 10 years, it is called precocious. If menarche occurs before 10 years of age, it's called precocious. I think now it has changed. It is maybe if it is less than 9.5 years. Postcoital bleeding denotes vaginal bleeding after sexual intercourse. So in the later we'll know the reasons for all this menstrual cycle irregularities. Actually, only amenorrhea is a term now mostly used. The other terminologies are being replaced by abnormal uterine bleeding. So what is abnormal uterine bleeding? Previously, it was termed as dysfunctional uterine bleeding. There is no identifiable cause. It is diagnosed by exclusion. So this is the types of abnormal uterine bleeding. Acute, and it can be acute or chronic. Acute bleeding occurs sporadically or it is superimposed on a chronic. They might have an acute episode of bleeding. Chronic, it is described as bleeding, menstrual bleeding related to the volume, timing, regularity and duration of bleeding that lasts for more than actually 6 months or more than 3 to 6 months. You have to remember that AUB does not include the bleeding that is caused by the lower genital tract. What is that lower genital tract bleeding? Any injuries in the lower vagina, vulva, urethra, these are not included in the abnormal uterine bleeding. So what is the incidence of abnormal uterine bleeding? About 10 to 15% of women experience episodes of abnormal uterine bleeding in their reproductive years, as I told you. Extremes of the reproductive life. Premenopausal, sometimes menopausal also. Pregnancy and during lactation. And adolescence, it's mainly due to immature hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, which leads to anovulatory cycles. So abnormal uterine bleeding can be anovulatory or ovulatory. Anovulatory accounts for 80% of the bleeding and ovulatory cycles account for 20% of the bleeding. So what is the pathophysiology behind the anovulatory and ovulatory bleeding? The anovulatory bleeding, most common is progesterone deficiency due to corpus luteal failure or continuous estrogen stimulation, which causes endometrial proliferation. This is the reason for the bleeding. Ovulatory, it is mostly the luteal phase deficiency. So just already we have gone through, it is the same thing in the table form, the menstrual pattern. Look at it. Just the cycle, the menstrual pattern, you can learn oligomenorrhea, the cycle length is more than 38 days. In polymenorrhea, the cycle length is less than, 24 days. Menorrhagia, it is increased menstrual flow and duration. Hypomenorrhea is scanty bleeding and shorter bleeding days. Metrorrhagia, irregular bleeding in between the cycles, called intermenstrual bleeding also. Menometrorrhagia, increased menstrual flow as well as irregular bleeding between the cycles. This is the menstrual pattern. So actually, heavy menstrual bleeding is the term nowadays used for menorrhagia. Okay. Same definition as menorrhagia. In heavy menstrual bleeding, excessive blood loss, interfering with physical, social, emotional, and quality of life. Excessive in amount. You have to remember these two things. Excessive in amount, more than 80 ml or 100 ml of blood loss. Duration of flow and duration is also more than 5 days. Then we say it is heavy menstrual bleeding. So like I told you, now we say it is menorrhagia is nothing but heavy menstrual bleeding. So now menorrhagia is a symptom and not a disease. Okay, the menstrual cycle is unaltered. Duration and quantity of, as I told you, it is duration and quantity of menstrual loss is increased. The causes of menorrhagia. Causes can be divided like general causes, pelvic causes, contraceptive use, and hormonal. So general causes are blood disc ariasis. What is blood disc ariasis? Like leukemia, thrombocytopenia, and coagulopathy. Von Willebrand said thyroid dysfunction, both hypo and hyperthyroidism can cause menorrhagia in the initial phases. Genital tuberculosis also causes menorrhagia in the initial stage. Later it causes secondary amenorrhea. Pelvic causes, pelvic inflammatory diseases, any pelvic adhesions cause hyperemia and increased vascularity and causes menorrhagia. Uterine fibroids, endometrial hyperplasia, and adenomyosis. We will learn about all this in the class later on in detail. Any ovarian tumors, including PCOD, is one of the cause for menorrhagia, endometriosis. Then any contraceptive use, IUCDs. What is IUCD? Intrauterine contraceptive devices. Intrauterine contraceptive devices sometimes causes menorrhagia. In 5% of the population, IUCD causes menorrhagia. Post-tubal sterilization. After a tubectomy, the cause is unknown. Patients present with menorrhagia, heavy menstrual bleeding, with the complaint of heavy menstrual bleeding initially for the first few months. Progesterone only pills or any OC pills also. Sometimes it is because of irregular use of the pills, and sometimes of the low dosage of the pills also causes this abnormal uterine bleeding. Hormonal, actually hormonal bar AUB. As I told you, it's ovulatory or under the ovulatory comes the irregular ripening or irregular shedding. We'll be learning about it later. Anovulatory, 80%, and metropathia hemorrhagica is a type of abnormal uterine bleeding mostly seen in the premenopausal woman. So we have a classification system for AUB which was introduced in 2011. by the International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics. FIGO, it's called the FIGO classification system for AUB. You see the pictures of a, so what do you notice in the picture? There's a palm and a dollar. It's a dollar and it's okay, it's a coin. Not our Indian, maybe it's a foreign currency. So it's called a palm coin classification. So this mnemonic palm coin, the palm, the P in the palm represents a polyp, adenomyosis. A is adenomyosis, L is leiomyoma. This leiomyoma has another subclassification depending upon the site of the fibroid. Then M represents malignancy and hyperplasia. So the coin represents, the C represents the coagulopathy. This is the causes for AUB. Ovulatory dysfunction, endometrial causes, any endometrial infection, endometritis can cause AUB. Iatrogenic, that is because of any usage of medicines. Iatrogenic means it's caused by treatment or any drugs used. Some of the causes come under non-classified. So we can remember this palm coin classification. So this is the FIGO classification for menstrual disorders. We have already been, so the palm comes under all the structural causes. So there's a structural cause in the uterus, in the pelvis. The others are the non-structural causes. This is due to hormonal, drugs, or any coagulation disorders. This, you can look at the subclassification system for leiomyoma. So look at the submucosal fibroids. So depending upon the position of the fibroid, again there is a subclassification. It is given type 0, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5 and type 6. So type 0 is pedunculatory and intracavity. You can look at in the cavity in this. And 50%, this 50% is intramural, and more than 50% is intramural. 3% type 3 contacts endometrium, 100% are intramural. So 4 is completely, it is intramural. So 5 is subserosal. What is intramural? It is in the uterine musculature. That's why it's called intramural. Subserosal, the outer covering of the uterus. Subserosal. So 5. When more than 50% is, it is type 5. When more than 50% is subserosal, type 5. Type 6 is subserosal, and type 6 is more than 50%. Type 5 is more than 50% or equal to 50% is type 5. Type 7 is when it has a pedicle. You look at this pedicle, it's a pedunculated. If there is a pedicle, it comes under type 7. So then so when you give the classification, it looks like LSM0, LSM1, LSM2. It is like that. So how do you approach a case of AUB? In our previous class, detailed gynecological history. We have learned how to take a detailed gynecological history. So history, age, age at menarche, parity, and the menstrual history and examination will help you to come to a appropriate diagnosis. So history, examination, both combined will get us to the cause of the abnormal uterine bleeding. So you know how to take the history in a gynecological case. We have already gone through in my previous class. So always it is mandatory that um, any AUB, you have to first rule out pregnancy and then go through the other investigations. So any history of hormones, drugs, and you have to rule out pregnancy. So these are the investigations we have to do. This blood, you have to take a complete blood count. We have to know the severity of the bleeding, hemoglobin S, coagulation profile, bleeding time, clotting time, to rule out any coagulation disorders. Then for any structural abnormality like uterine fibroids, endometriosis, adenomyosis, polyps can be ruled out by doing an ultrasound, MRI, and a hysteroscopy. Then these are minor procedures through which we can come to a diagnosis and the pattern of AUB after a pathological examination. So you can do a DNC and send the endometrial scrapings for histopathological examination, hysteroscopic guided endometrial biopsy, endometrial aspiration biopsy. The same thing. Endometrial study by ultrasound and pelvic angiography. Pelvic angiography is done in cases where any varicosities of the uterine vessels are noted. So how do you manage a case of menorrhagia or heavy menstrual bleeding? So you can divide the woman according to the age, young woman and an older woman. So in young women who desire contraception and who does not desire contraception. So young woman who does not desire contraception, not contraception, not desire conception, and they want to conceive, they want to get pregnant, so you can give him progesterone only pills or progestogens only, ethamsulate, NSAIDs. What are NSAIDs? Like mefenamic acid, tranexamic acid, antifibrinolytics for 3 to 4 months, or GnRH for 3 to 4 months. So where contraception also desired and they don't want to get pregnant, they can be put on combined oral contraceptive pills and other hormones or Mirena. Mirena is an IUCD, intrauterine contraceptive device. We'll learn about Mirena in our further sections. So Mirena, if it is effective, it can be continued for 6 to 9 months and it can be followed. If Mirena fails, then we will go for minimal invasive surgeries and hysterectomies with conservation of ovaries. So in young women, it is always desired to conserve the ovaries. In older women, basically we have to rule out any cancer or uterine pathology. So if it is a normal uterus, DUB, medical therapy can be tried, combined oral contraceptives, but it is contraindicated over 40 years. So you can try progesterones. Then if there is no response only, we will go for surgeries. Then if any pathology is there, then we have to go for surgery. So abnormal uterine bleeding in adolescence, we call it as puberty menorrhagia. We are still using this term as puberty menorrhagia in young adults. Mostly the reason is immature hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis or this one, blood dyscariasis like von Willebrand's disease, hypothyroidism, polycystic PCOD or polycystic ovarian genital tuberculosis, liver disorders, feminizing ovarian tumors, adrenal hyperplasia. What are the clinical features in puberty menorrhagia? It is menorrhagia or heavy menstrual bleeding, heavy regular cycles, normal bleeding lasting for several days. So mainly the young children, they come with anemia. So proper history taking, you will know, and examination, you can know if she's having menorrhagia. And mostly we can observe this, most of the cases of puberty, they do not have an dysmenorrhea, that is abdominal pain during menstruation, because they are anovulatory cycles. So you need to investigate puberty menorrhagia to rule out the cause. So HB, bleeding time, proteinuria, coagulation factors, blood film, X-ray chest for tuberculosis, thyroid function test, pelvic ultrasound to rule out any early fibroid or polycystic ovarian disease, PCR test to rule out endometrial tuberculosis by sending an endometrial tissue after DNC. So how do you manage a case of puberty menorrhagia? You have to control the bleeding first, and you have to correct the anemia, and you have to prevent it from recurring. So you have to treat the cause. So if there is an acute episode of bleeding, IV Premarin estrogen, it is 25 milligrams is given 6 to 8 hourly to control the bleeding. Thereafter, estrogen for 21 days and progesterone added in the last 10 days for 3 to 6 cycles will regularize the cycles. In chronic menorrhagia, OC pills for 3 to 6 cycles is given. NSAIDs in ovulatory cycles. Androgens are also used, but it causes masculinizing features in the female. So mostly it is not used. GnRH, progesterones, and basically if the patient is severely anemic, they will need blood transfusion, arterial embolization, and uterine tamponade are the procedures we'll be later learning in the class. Tranexamic acid is given 500 milligrams TID. It's antifibrinolytic. It will control the bleeding, menstrual bleeding. So this abnormal uterine bleeding we will go through abnormal uterine in the reproductive age group. As I told you previously, this dysfunctional uterine bleeding has been replaced now with AUB. AUB in the reproductive age in the absence of pregnancy. So it is called, if any pregnancy related bleeding, then it does not come under abnormal uterine bleeding. So in 2011, this FIGO classification, the palm coin system has come into play, because the abnormal uterine bleeding may not be the reason. The bleeding might not be the reason, maybe have a structural cause, but the structural cause may not be the reason for the bleeding. So now this palm coin system will represent. So now all abnormal uterine bleeding is classified like this. So if the structural cause is a polyp, we say it's AUBP. If the structural cause is adenomyosis, it is called AUBA. So leiomyoma, it's a fibroid. So any fibroid, it comes under AUBL, malignancy. Any malignancy, whether it is cervical malignancy or endometrial malignancy, we will call abnormal AUBM. And the others, non-structural causes, coagulopathy, AUBC, AUBO in ovulatory disorders, endometrial causes. Iatrogenic, I told you, because of some drug usage. Any IUCDs, it's AUBI, and some are come under non-specified causes. So we will be going through the AUBP. AUBP, look at the cervical polyp, the speculum view. So abnormal growth pattern from mucous membrane. It is a common benign growth. Benign means it's not a carcinoma. So it's called benign. From the surface, this cut section of the cervical canal, you can notice the growths. So these can cause what the pattern of abnormal uterine bleeding is intermenstrual bleeding or postcoital bleeding. It can cause intermenstrual bleeding and postcoital bleeding. Then look at the endometrial polyps. So endometrial polyps, these are localized outgrowths in the inside the uterine cavity, endometrium, from the endometrium. These can cause heavy menstrual bleeding, intermenstrual bleeding, and postmenopausal bleeding too. Adenomyosis. What is adenomyosis? This is presence of, look at this flakes of endometrium in the myometrium. So, and this is the endometrial tissue in the myometrium. So, these can cause, this is a normal uterus, but if the endometrium implants in the myometrium, it is a condition called adenomyosis, and it can cause heavy menstrual bleeding, the pattern of bleedings. Then leiomyoma. So these are, what is a fibroid, leiomyoma or a fibroid? It is benign tumors that arise from the smooth muscle cells of the tissue, containing various amount of and they cause heavy menstrual bleeding. They can cause intermenstrual bleeding, postmenopausal bleeding, and irregular bleeding. Malignancy. So cervical cancer or endometrial cancer. These all can cause heavy menstrual bleeding, irregular bleeding, and postmenopausal bleeding too. So how to approach a patient with AUB? So careful history taking, age at menarche, the parity, the menstrual history. So menstrual history is very important. Regularity, frequency, duration, volume. Any history of postcoital bleedings to be elicited, dysmenorrhea. So we will know whether it is an ovulatory bleeding, whether it is primary dysmenorrhea, secondary dysmenorrhea. So dysmenorrhea, we have to know the reasons for the dysmenorrhea. Dyspareunia, any pain during sexual intercourse. History of any infertility. So any history of tuberculosis, causing TB, endometritis. So there can be history of menorrhagia or amenorrhea. So vaginal discharges, any endometritis, any infections, any recent abortions. They also cause abnormal post-abortal. Then history of IUCDs, occipils, hormone uses, and any symptoms of hypothyroidism. So examination of the neck is very important when you to look for any goiter and symptoms of bleeding and disorder. So you have to elicit the, if for any bleeding bleeding occasions when during any injuries, the bleeding time, and history of any drugs taken or any chronic medications, like some medications cause prolonged bleeding, like anticoagulants and some phenothiazines and all. They can cause prolonged bleeding. So this is a type of anovulatory bleeding. In premenopausal women, it's a condition called metropathia hemorrhagica. It's a specialized form of anovulation seen in women between 40 to 45 years. It is not related to any parity. So typical symptoms of metropathia hemorrhagica is continuous painless vaginal bleeding preceded by some period of amenorrhea. There is always a history of amenorrhea followed by continuous vaginal bleeding. Then there might be a history of menorrhagia. Sometimes we might think it is it looks like an abortion or an ectopic pregnancy because of history of amenorrhea. What is the pathology in metropathia hemorrhagica? It's myohyperplasia. The myometrium gets thickened up to 25, hyperplasia of the myometrium, 25 mm. And you can look, it's a uniformly enlarged uterus. Endometrium is thick and polypoidal, and there is cystic glandular hyperplasia. It is called Swiss cheese pattern of endometrium. There is no secretory endometrium. That means no secretory endometrium means there is no progesterone over there. So one or both the ovaries may be cystic. So this is how it looks. Look at the myometrium, it is thickened. There is diffuse polypoidal growth and there is a cyst in one of the ovary. So this is how cut section of a metropathia hemorrhagica uterus looks like. So the cut section you can see, this is the thickened myometrium, thickened and polypoidal myometrium and a polypoidal endometrium. This is a polypoidal endometrium. This is the histology. There is superficial necrosis, which looks like first day of menstruation. The glands, however, do not show any secretory changes. There is no secretory endometrium. That means there is no progesterone. There is luteal phase problem here. So, how do you investigate? History, general examination, pelvic examination, blood counts, ultrasound can help you in the diagnosis. Dilatation and curettage, uterine aspiration, histoguided biopsy, and the endometrium is sent for histopathological examination. Doppler ultrasound can also be used to see the vascularity, which will help in the diagnosis. HSG or histosalivum can be employed, and for hysteroscopy to see the polypoidal growths, and take a biopsy too. So how do you treat a case of AUB? The treatment is based on the age of the patient, whether the patient want to retain the fertility, and any previous treatments given, the severity of menorrhagia. Basically, the anemia needs to be corrected. So first we go for conservative treatment. In my case of menorrhagia is not heavy and the woman is not anemic. So conservative is reserved for women who the menorrhagia is not very heavy and the patient is not anemic. We ask them to follow the menstrual chart for a few months, maintain, so that we know the pattern of the bleeding. Sometimes spontaneous cure is possible and can be evaded. Basically, if the patient is anemic, we need to correct the anemia. So first line of treatment is medical management. So first we will try medicines. Most of the medicines which are given are combined oral contraceptive pills, which contain 20 to 30 micrograms of ethinyl estradiol plus progesterones in cyclical pattern for 3 months. It will regularize. It has side effects like nausea, headache, hypertension, hyperglycemia, thrombosis, liver and gallbladder disease. Progesterogens. Only progesterogens are also given. The dosage. Sometimes progesterones can continuously 3 monthly or 3 monthly injections like Depo-Provera, that is medroxyprogesterone, and some implants like it is sub-implants, subdermal implants are kept and which releases the hormone slowly from that. Then gestanon, danazol, GnRH, tranexamic acid. Tranexamic acid, antifibrinolytics, helps to control the bleeding. 1 gram 6th hourly. NSAIDs like mefenamic acids. Tranexamic acid combined with etamsulate and NSAID mefenamic acid You know the Trapic MF tablets, it controls bleeding in most of the time. 50% of the bleeding is controlled. Then Mirena IUCD, it is an intrauterine hormonal intrauterine contraceptive device which releases, which contains 52 milligrams of levonorgestrel. Ormifloxacin, it's a SERM, it's a selective estrogen receptor modulator, 60 milligrams twice weekly. So Mirena IUCD is as I told you, it's a hormonal IUCD used to treat menorrhagia, and it can be help whoever has a desire for contraception. It suppresses the endometrium with minimal side effects. It has no action of the ovaries. The E2 and progesterone levels remain normal. It reduces the blood loss by 70 to 90% in 3 months and acts as a contraceptive for those who do not desire pregnancy. And mainly it is the Mirena can be retained for 5 years. So this is how the IUCD looks like. It has a vertical limb and 2 horizontal limbs. This vertical limb contains the steroid hormone, the levonorgestrel. You look at this picture. This is how the IUCD is placed inside the uterus. So there are many advantages of using a Mirena than going to other minimal invasive surgeries or any ablative techniques. It is very low cost. It is done in the OPD procedure. No hospitalization is required. And so as I told you, it helps both in controlling the bleeding, menstrual bleeding, and also it helps in contraception. So it will preserve the fertility after its removal, which is this is the advantage of Mirena IUCD over the other ablative or minimal surgical techniques. There are few disadvantages too. Slightly difficult to insert, but mostly it is not. It takes 3 months before it becomes very effective. In some patients, 20 to 25% amenorrhea occurs. Sometimes this amenorrhea is not desirable by most of the women. Ectopic pregnancy, only 0.2% has been reported. Hysterectomy is required in 25% by the end of the 3 years if menorrhagia recurs. So, next come the minimal invasive surgeries. So, minimal invasive surgeries, dilatation and curettage for endometriosis is the basic one to rule out any endometrial, especially in the reproductive and premenopausal women. You have to do a DNC and endometrial study, even if you are planning for a Mirena IUCD also, especially in a premenopausal woman, and you have to do a DNC and do an endometrial study to rule out the endometrial cancer. So under the minimal invasive surgeries come the ablative techniques. It is first generation and second generation. First generation are the hysteroscopic endometrial by resectoscope, loop, roller ball coagulation, laser, transcervical endometrial resection. The second generation are radiofrequency induced thermal ablation, cavaterm balloon therapy, microwave endometrial ablation, laser therapy, uterine tamponade, and bilateral uterine artery embolization. So the difference between the first generation and second generation are mostly it is low cost, mostly an OPD procedure, shorter duration, and more effective than the first generation. TCRE is the transcervical endometrial resection is an expensive procedure than the RITE. So next comes if minimal other surgery. So surgery is abdominal removal of the uterus through abdominal route is abdominal hysterectomy. Vaginal hysterectomy can be done. So laparoscopic hysterectomy is also done, or LAVH, laparoscopic assisted vaginal hysterectomy. So what are the indications to do the surgery? If medical management and minimal invasive surgery fails, if menorrhagia recurs, in older women more than 40 years, not desirous of childbearing, and who opt for hysterectomy as a primary treatment, or the ablation fails. So the complications of surgeries can be ovarian atrophy due to devascularization, um, and they can have menopausal symptoms and its complications. So because of surgeries, there can be some adhesions in the vaginal wall causing ovarian residual syndrome, dyspareunia, and chronic pelvic pains. There can be wall prolapse. That means you remove the uterus and the wall sometimes comes out of the vagina. That is called wall prolapse. There can be sexual dyspareunia because while doing the hysterectomy, the vagina can be shortened. So due to short vagina, some patient complaint of dysmenorrhea. Chronic abdominal pain is present due to pelvic adhesions, postoperative pelvic adhesions. So some nerves can be injured, due to which patients can have urinary and bowel, some urinary continence problems, some psychological disturbances too. So there are new systems. It's called the VersaPoint bipolar electrosurgical system for the ablative techniques. For ablation, it is cheap. It causes excellent hemostasis and causes instantaneous tissue vaporization. So how do you manage? How do you summarize? First, you do medical therapy. That is the first line of treatment. If medical therapy fails, then we'll go for Mirena IUCD. Then if Mirena IUCD fails, then we go for the ablative techniques. If all these above methods fail, then we go for the surgeries. Then this is ovulatory AUB. So irregular ripening, it's deficient corpus luteal function. The breakthrough bleeding occurs before the actual menstruation in the form of spotting or brownish dirt. Progesterone given during late luteal phase cures the spotting. Irregular shedding or Halban's disease is called. Because of persistent corpus luteum, the menstruation comes on time, is prolonged but not heavy. Progesterone can suppress the bleeding but needs to be taken as a tapering dose. So the next menstrual disorder is dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea, or what do we say? It is pain during menstruation, menstrual cramps. So what is the definition? Dysmenorrhea means cramping pain accompanying menstruation. The types of different dysmenorrhea is primary dysmenorrhea, not associated with any, there's no pelvic pathology in primary dysmenorrhea. In secondary dysmenorrhea is associated with some pelvic cause. This is the reason for the dysmenorrhea. So there are three clinical varieties of dysmenorrhea. One is the spasmodic, congestive, and the membranous dysmenorrhea. Spasmodic dysmenorrhea, the pain is present on the first and second day of the menstruation. Congestive dysmenorrhea, pain and discomfort before the onset of menstruation. Membranous dysmenorrhea is a rare variety, and the endometrium is shed as a cast at the time of menstruation. It is associated with painful uterus. This is very rare condition. So what is the cause for the pain in dysmenorrhea? So mostly it is in ovulatory cycles. So what happens? when the corpus luteum start regressing and the progesterone levels in the menstrual flow occurs. When the progesterone, under the influence of progesterone, the prostaglandins, endoperoxidases, endoperoxide metabolites are increased. These prostaglandins, mainly PGF2 alpha, these causes increased myometrial contractions. What happens in myometrial? It causes increased uterine activity, uterine ischemia, sensitization of the nerve terminals to prostaglandins, and this is a cause for pain. Reduced blood flow causes ischemia means reduced blood flow. This is the reason for the pain during menstruations, and mostly it is observed in ovulatory cycles. That's why in puberty menorrhagia, mostly it is painless because of anovulatory cycles. So what is the differentiate? Let's go through the differentiating features of primary and secondary dysmenorrheas. So primary dysmenorrhea occurs within 2 years of menarche, maybe pre or post menstrual. Cramping, hypogastrium, back, inner thighs, it can be dull, aching pain also in secondary dysmenorrhea. So the symptoms are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, fatigue. So in secondary, it can be dyspareunia, infertility, menstrual disorders, any type of menstrual disorders. Pelvic findings are normal, variable, because secondary is due to some pelvic pathology. So depending on the cause, the pelvic findings. So etiology is excessive ischemia and excessive prostaglandin production. Endometriosis, PID, adenomyosis, fibroids. In secondary and dysmenorrhea, there is some pelvic pathology like pelvic inflammatory diseases, endometriosis, fibroids, pelvic vein condition. Management. So management. So second, primary dysmenorrhea can be done with counseling, analgesics, antispasmodics, oxypills, surgery, or laparoscopic uterosacral nerve ablation. Treatment is secondary dysmenorrhea is treated by treating the cause. So the investigations are mostly helpful to diagnose secondary amenorrhea. So pelvic sonography, you can CT scan or MRI scan to know if any leiomyomas, endometriosis, any adenomyosis which is causing the pain. Diagnostic hysterosalpingography, sonosalpingography to rule out any endometrial pathology. Endoscopic, diagnostic, hysteroscopic and laparoscopic for endometriosis to diagnose any endometriosis. So how to fight your way through the dysmenorrhea? So look, dysmenorrhea can be cured. This is primary dysmenorrhea. You can fight it like this. You can use a hot water bag to relieve for the relief of the pain. Yeah, actually, you have to be exercising and practice some yoga, meditation. This all will help you in curing dysmenorrhea. So mainly you need to counsel the patient, psychotherapy, some medical measures like medical treatment can be taken, and very unbearable condition, surgical intervention is done. Medical management is mainly analgesics. So paracetamol also can cross it, paracetamol, naproxen, ibuprofen, everything. All these analgesics can help reduce the pain. Antispasmodics like hyoscine bromide, buscopan tablets, or drotaverine. These are prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors like mefenamic acid, Meftal. These can be help in reduce the pain. Glyceryl trinitrate, then progesterone containing IUCD like Mirena suppresses the ovulation. OC pills also suppresses ovulation. If ovulation is suppressed, there is no progesterone, so no PGF2 alpha, so there is no endoperoxidases, which causes this the pain factors. Danazole, GnRH antagonist, vitamin E also helps helps in dysmenorrhea. Then if only medical measures fail and if it is severe, So secondary dysmenorrhea can be treating the cause of it. It depends on the age. So when you treat secondary, it depends on the age, desire for child, menstrual function, patient's perception. So surgical intervention, diagnostic hysteroscopy followed by a DNC. Then diagnostic laparoscopy for to rule out if any chocolate cyst is there, endometriosis, which causes dysmenorrhea. Then Luna, it is a laser-assisted uterosacral nerve ablation, a laparotomy, a presacral neurectomy, a Cotys operation, finally a hysterectomy. Then TENS is a transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation. So it will help in curing the pain. Let's quickly go through this premenstrual syndrome. Premenstrual syndrome or premenstrual tension. What is this PMS? Premenstrual syndrome. It's a symptom complex actually. It is primarily by cyclical changes, and mostly this PMS is associated with ovulatory cycles. It occurs 7 to 14 days prior to menstruations and spontaneously resolves after the menses. So as I tell you, it's a symptom complex and mood swings. So look at it. The woman is happy, is sorry. The different mood swings you can observe here. So causes for premenstrual syndrome is result of multiple biochemical abnormalities like estrogen excess or progesterone deficiency, increased carbohydrate intolerance, and pyridoxine deficiency, increased production of vasopressin, aldosterone, prolactin, systemic prostaglandins, fluctuations in opiate peptide concentration affecting endorphin levels. So pain, headache, breast pain, abdominal pain. These are the clinical features. There can be water retention, behavioral changes, and autonomic changes. The pain can be headache, breast pain, abdominal cramps, muscle stiffness, backache, generalized body aches. There'll be water retention. As I told you, because of increased production of vasopressin, aldosterone, prolactin, there can be water retention, breast pain, bloating, and weight gain. Behavioral changes, low performance, difficulty in concentration, irritability, depression, forgetfulness, low judgment, anxiety, loneliness, feel like crying. Autonomic changes are dizziness, faintness, nausea, vomiting, hot flushes. So diagnosis is by careful history taking and questioning. Symptoms correlate with the premenstrual phase. No organic pelvic lesion is detected. Treatment is mainly by reassurance, counseling, psychotherapy, and selective use of drugs to help to control the symptoms. General measures, basically exercise, relaxation, meditation, and yoga are likely to be beneficial. Oral contraceptives renders the because it mostly in the ovulatory cycles, oral contraceptive pills which suppresses the ovulation because it can provide some relief. So medical management for psychosomatic reasons, vitamins like B1, B6, vitamin E, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor like sertraline, citalopram, anxiolytics can help in the psychosomatic condition. For breast pain, danazole, bromocriptine, GnRH can be used. For pelvic pain and yasmin. Yasmin contains some spironolactone with the and then evening primrose oil. This is also helpful. Prostaglandin inhibitors, oral contraceptive pill, progesterone, Mirena, IUCD also helps in premenstrual syndrome. So premenstrual syndrome is a functional disorder found mostly in educated and economically independent working middle-aged women and requires treatment because premenstrual syndrome needs to be attended and proper counseling done because it is involved with some legal issues and women rights issues. That is why premenstrual syndrome is very important and it should be treated and attended very carefully by taking proper history. So In our next class, we'll be going through the amenorrhea and other menstrual disorders, secondary amenorrhea, primary and secondary amenorrhea. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you.